Tanya. Is there anything we needed to do for discussion this week?
I think we're just showing a video because they have a quiz next week.
Oh, that's right, the one on desiccation tolerance.
I think we were supposed to do something for that, but we didn't go over it in office hours because no one showed up to mine.
Oh yeah, no one showed up to mine either. Maybe we can make a quick video for the kids and help them out so they can do well in the quiz next week.
That sounds like a good idea, but I think we're gonna need help because I really don't know much about desiccation tolerance.
That's true, I don't really either, but I know I have a friend and I think he can help us out. Maybe I'll go ask him.
That's awesome, it sounds like a good plan.
Perfect.
Hey students, Paige and I have put together a video on desiccation tolerance to help with your upcoming quiz. We've also had one of our friends, Gurinder, come help us out with some of the information.
Yeah, so with that, let's get right into it. All right, guys, so we're gonna get started and we're gonna first confront some questions that I'm sure you have. So first, what is desiccation tolerance and why are some plants more desiccant tolerant than others? All right, so desiccation tolerance is the ability of certain organisms to survive extreme water loss without surviving any lethal damage. To be more specific, desiccant tolerant plants can actually survive water loss to 10% of their relative water concentration and still revive full metabolism when they're exposed to water. So this is why they have the name resurrection plants, because they can be resurrected. Also, I think it's important to note that desiccation tolerance is not the same as drought tolerance. Desiccation tolerance involves severe, very severe to extreme, complete water loss, whereas dehydration is more mild, and drought involves ways to avoid dehydration. So just make sure you aren't getting those confused. And then reasons why some plants are more desiccant tolerant than others is because they're so sessile, meaning they can't move, and obviously they're in the ground. So when they experience a shortage of water or any other resource, they usually evolve some strategies to get around that. And so there's two ways that desiccant tolerant plants can evolve these capabilities. First, either their environment can abruptly change and they're forced to figure out a way to survive, and hence they become desiccant tolerant, or a certain species of plants living in a certain environment over a long period of time can adapt these same abilities. So let's take a look at some examples. So here we have 3 different species of desiccant tolerant plants from the Selaginella genus, and as you can see on the bottom row, that's an example of the desiccant form of the plant. And so you can see it's really dried up, they're small, they look a little wilted, they're yellow, they don't have much color or life to them. That's the desiccant form. And then we know that they're usually really small because some of the physical stresses that the plant is exposed to when it doesn't have access to water. So when the plant cells shrink, and they dry when they shrink, and so as a result, the plant itself also shrinks. And then as you can see on the top row, the plant is full, it's back to life, it's green, showing its color, and hence it's resurrected. All right, and then finally, I know you guys all remember Dr. Harada's video of the resurrection plant in the first weeks of lecture, but we have another example video here for you, so let's take a look. So as you can see, over time, over the days, the plant begins to start turning more yellow, getting smaller, wilting, and that is desiccation tolerance at work. And then it's coming back, the flowers. All right, and with that, we're gonna get into how did this process develop in plants? And I'm going to hand it on over to Tanya.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the history of how this process developed in plants. So desiccation, which is often fatal, is tolerated in many seeds and some vegetative tissues. While more commonly tolerated by seeds, some vegetative, non-vascular, and vascular plants have also come to possess this ancient trait, which has both disappeared and reappeared in various lineages. So now we're going to look at a little chart that I can talk more into of how it has disappeared and reappeared. The trait first appeared in the very early transition to terrestrial life in various organisms, including cyanobacteria, lichens, and green algae. And the trait was most likely present in an ancestor to all land plants, and then it was lost, which is seen right in the beginning of this red line. And then it probably came back and redeveloped in lycophytes, ferns, and some angiosperms. So as seen in this chart, Selaginella has developed it, ferns have developed it, and some various sorts of angiosperms. It has both disappeared and reappeared at these two red markings. And now to go more into the mechanisms of how desiccation tolerance occurs in these different types of plants, we're going to have my friend come and talk about the developmental processes.
Hey everyone, my name is Gurinder and I'll be going into the developmental processes a little bit in depth. Thank you to Paige and Tanya for inviting me to help you guys with this. We'll start off on the physiological level. During desiccation, concentration of secondary messengers that help control intracellular communications increase, specifically for calcium. There's also an increase in ABA, which is one of the earliest responses to desiccation is an increase in ABA. ABA is important because it lets the rest of the plant know that there's a desiccation tolerant building up, and that if those responses never occur, then the plant will eventually die because there's nothing to signal that desiccation is occurring. So that's ABA is very key here. And then the last thing is that the leaves fold upon themselves to lower their surface area. Less surface area means less water loss, and water loss is something in desiccation which is very key. So, and then we can move on to cellular level. The cells shrink during desiccation. This is because of loss of water, and then also that the plasma membrane, which is contains of lipids, all those lipids become unsaturated, and then the plasma membrane is basically destroyed, and the cells lose the rigidness, and so the cell basically collapses on itself. And if we can go to the next one, we have molecular level. Studies show that there's the levels of lipids and nucleotides, carbohydrates, amino acids, antioxidants, and defense compounds vary in both desiccation tolerant plants and non-desiccation tolerant plants. This was very crucial in their studies because it showed that levels were changing depending on the desiccation tolerant of the plant or the trait of the plant. During desiccation, peptides, amino acids, and nucleotide metabolites are much higher than non-desiccated plants, which is also something that's very key to remember. And then lastly, there's studies that are on a plant that revealed that some plants actually prefer to be metabolically desiccated because it allows them to get more of certain proteins or certain protective proteins. So that's also something to keep in mind of. And then lastly, we can talk about genetic level. During desiccation, RNA, DNA, proteins, and membranes, they're all unstable. That is because there's water loss, and that leads to the cells being unstable. And then especially on a genetic level, studies show that there's no definitive difference between desiccated or in the genomes of desiccated tolerant plants and non-desiccated plants, which is also key because the next point is that, however, that there is data to show that there is an increase in protective protein transcription in desiccated tolerant plants. So even though there's not a change in the genomes, there's still there's a variation of how much a certain thing is transcribed, and that's something that's very key in the genetic level. I think that's all I had for you guys. I'll pass it over to Tanya and Paige to close out this video.
Thanks for watching our video. I hope it helped in preparing for your quiz this week.
Yeah, and if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us via email, and good luck on the quiz.